I always thought my life was a steady rhythm, like the hum of the coffee maker every morning or the predictable creak of our porch swing. 32 years old, married for 7, a decent job managing a hardware store, and a house with a mortgage we could just about handle. My wife, Emily, was the melody to my routine, blonde hair that caught the sun like a halo, a laugh that could melt the iciest day, and a way of making even the dullest moments feel alive. We weren't perfect, sure. There were arguments about bills, her late nights at the gallery where she worked, my tendency to zone out when she talked about art I didn't understand. But I loved her. I trusted her. That was the foundation, wasn't it? It started with a flicker, a tiny crack in the picture I'd painted of us. She'd been distant for weeks. Nothing I could pin down, just a feeling. Her phone buzzed more than usual, and she'd tilt the screen away, smiling faintly as she typed. "Work stuff," she'd say, brushing it off. I didn't push. I'm not the jealous type, or I wasn't, back then. But one evening, I came home early from a slow shift, the house quiet except for the faint hum of the shower upstairs. Her phone sat on the kitchen counter, unlocked, a message glowing on the screen. "Can't wait to see you tomorrow, East same place." No name, just a number. My stomach twisted, but I told myself it was nothing. Friends, maybe. A client from the gallery. I put the phone down, poured a glass of water, and waited for her to come down. Her hair damp and her smile as bright as ever. "You're early," she said, kissing my cheek. I nodded, said nothing about the text. But that night I couldn't sleep. The words burned into me. Same place. The next day, I did something I'd never done before. I called in sick me, the guy who hadn't missed a day in years, and I followed her. She left the house at noon, dressed in a navy skirt and a blouse I'd bought her last Christmas. Her hair tied back like she was heading to work. But she didn't go to the gallery. She drove across town, to a little cafe I'd never heard of, tucked behind a row of shops I didn't know existed. I parked a block away, watched her step out, her heels clicking on the pavement. And then I saw him, tall, broad-shouldered, dark hair slicked back, wearing a suit that screamed money. He stood from a table outside, kissed her cheek. Too long, too close, and she laughed, her hand lingering on his arm. My chest tightened. I stayed there, frozen behind the wheel, watching them talk, sip coffee, share a pastry like it was nothing, like I didn't exist. Driving home, my hands shook on the steering wheel. The image of them replayed in my head, her fingers brushing his, the way she leaned in when he spoke, the ease of it all. I wanted to believe it was innocent, a business meeting, a friend she hadn't mentioned. But the text, the secrecy, the way she'd been pulling away, it clawed at me. I got back before she did, sat in the living room with the TV off, the silence pressing in. When she walked through the door, humming, a paper bag from the cafe in her hand, I forced a smile. "Good day," I asked, my voice steady despite the storm inside. "Oh, same old," she said, setting the bag down. "Brought you a croissant." She didn't look me in the eye. That night, I waited until she was asleep, her breathing soft and even beside me. I slipped out of bed, took her phone from the nightstand, and went to the bathroom. The lock screen code was still our anniversary. Ironic, I thought, as my thumb tapped it in. The message thread was there, buried under a fake name, gallery contact. Dozens of texts, weeks worth. "Missed you today. You looked stunning last night. Can't stop thinking about that spot by the river." My throat closed up. There were photos too, her in a dress I didn't recognize, him beside her, their heads tilted together. One from a week ago, her hand on his chest, a grassy hill behind them, the river glinting in the distance. I scrolled until my eyes burned, until I couldn't anymore. Then I put the phone back, crawled into bed, and lay there, staring at the ceiling, her warmth beside me feeling like a lie. The next morning, I watched her over breakfast, her casual chatter about a new exhibit at the gallery. Every word sounded hollow. I nodded, sipped my coffee, and decided I needed proof. Something undeniable, something I could hold on to when I confronted her. I bought a tiny camera online, the kind you hide in a smoke detector. It arrived 2 days later, and I installed it in our living room while she was out. I told myself it was just to be sure, to catch her in a lie if there was one. But deep down I already knew. The waiting was torture. Every time she left the house, every time her phone buzzed, I imagined her with him, laughing, touching, sharing moments that were supposed to be mine. The camera caught her 3 days later. I'd been at work, restocking shelves, my mind half on her, half on the nails and screws I was counting. I got home late, found her asleep on the couch, a blanket draped over her, the TV flickering with some cooking show. She looked peaceful, innocent. I almost didn't check the footage, but I did. I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop, the grainy video loading silently. At first, it was nothing, just her tidying up, watering the plants. Then the doorbell rang on screen. She opened it, and there he was, stepping inside like he belonged. My heart stopped. They didn't waste time. She pulled him in, her hands on his face, their mouths meeting in a way that made my stomach lurch. They moved to the couch, our couch, and it went on, her laughter mixing with his low murmurs, her blouse slipping off, his hands everywhere. I shut the laptop, my breath ragged. My hands clenched so tight my nails dug into my palms. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the garage, surrounded by tools and half-finished projects, replaying it in my head. The betrayal wasn't just the act. It was the ease, the familiarity, the way she gave him what she'd been withholding from me for months. I thought about confronting her, screaming, throwing it in her face, but that wouldn't be enough. She'd cry, apologize, promise to change, and I'd still be the fool who'd trusted her. No, I needed something bigger, something that would cut deeper than she'd cut me. I started planning, my mind spinning with ideas, each darker than the last. Revenge wasn't just about pain. It was about taking back what she'd stolen. My pride, my trust, my life. The next day, I called in sick again, drove to that cafe, and watched from across the street. They met there, same routine, same smiles. I took photos with my phone, zoomed in on his face. He was polished, confident, probably some rich art collector or gallery owner. I didn't care who he was, just what he'd done. I followed him after they parted. His sleek black car winding through the city to a high-rise downtown. I noted the address, the parking garage, the way he swaggered inside. He wasn't just her lover. He was her escape, her fantasy. And I'd make sure it became her nightmare. I spent the next week gathering pieces, building a puzzle only I could see. Emily didn't suspect a thing. She went about her days, kissing me goodbye, texting me about dinner plans, all while I watched her through a lens of disgust. I dug into the man's life. His name was Daniel Hargrove. I learned from a quick web search tied to the building he'd entered. 41. Divorced. A real estate developer with a taste for art and apparently my wife. His social media was a gallery of smug selfies, private jets, gallery openings, a penthouse with a view I'd never afford. Emily was in some of the background shots, blurred but unmistakable, her laugh frozen in pixels. Each discovery fueled me, sharpened my focus. I wasn't just hurt. I was furious, a quiet, cold fury that settled into my bones. I started small, testing the waters. I hacked her email, not hard, since she still used our dog's name as a password. There were messages to Daniel, flirty and intimate, plans for a weekend away at their spot by the river. I printed them, stashed them in a lockbox under the garage workbench. I tracked her movements with the camera, caught her sneaking him in twice more that week. Each time, I watched the footage later, my jaw tight, my mind racing. I didn't confront her, not yet. I needed her to feel safe, to keep going, to dig her own grave deeper. Meanwhile, I researched Daniel. His business dealings weren't spotless. Shady permits, lawsuits from tenants, whispers of coercion. Perfect. A man like that had enemies, and I'd used them. One night, I drove to the river spot she'd mentioned in her texts. It was an hour out of town, a secluded bend with a cabin tucked among the trees. I found it easily. Her car had been there, tire tracks still fresh in the mud. The cabin was locked, but through the window, I saw traces of them. A wine bottle, her scarf draped over a chair, a pair of his cufflinks on the table. I took photos, my hands steady despite the rage boiling inside. This wasn't just an affair. It was a second life, one she'd built behind my back. I stood there in the dark, the river whispering nearby, and decided I'd burn it all down. Not with fire, not with noise, but with precision. She'd lose everything, and she'd never see it coming. Back home, I became a ghost in my own life. I smiled at Emily, cooked dinner with her, listened to her ramble about her day, all while my mind churned. She didn't notice the change, or maybe she didn't care. She was too wrapped up in her secret, her stolen moments with Daniel. I let her think I was oblivious, let her sink deeper into her lie. Meanwhile, I worked in the shadows. I contacted a private investigator, a gruff guy named Mike I found through a coworker. I didn't tell him everything, just enough. I need dirt on this guy, I said, sliding him Daniel's name and photo. Anything you can find. Mike didn't ask questions. He took the cash and promised results. 2 days later, he called me to a diner across town. He slid a folder over the table, his voice low. "Your guy's a piece of work," he said. Inside were documents, bank statements, emails, a deposition from an old lawsuit. Daniel had bribed officials to push through a development, evicted families with forged notices, even strong-armed a competitor into selling cheap. There were photos too, him with other women, not just Emily, at hotels and clubs. "Serial cheater," Mike grunted. "Likes them married. Keeps them on rotation." I stared at the pictures, my grip tightening. Emily wasn't special to him, she was a game, a trophy. That made it worse, somehow. She'd thrown me away for a man who'd discard her too. I thanked Mike, paid him extra to keep digging, and drove home with the folder hidden in my trunk. That night, Emily was out. "Gallery event," she'd said, her perfume lingering as she left. I sat in the garage, the folder open, and started planning the revenge. It wouldn't be quick. It wouldn't be loud. It'd be a slow, cruel unraveling, one that hit them both where it hurt most. For Daniel, his money, his reputation. For Emily, her freedom, her illusion of control. I'd use his enemies, his secrets, and her own choices against them. The river cabin would be the stage. I'd make sure of it. As I locked the folder away, I felt something shift inside me. The man I'd been was gone. What was left was sharper, colder, ready to strike. The folder from Mike became my roadmap, a treasure trove of leverage I'd wield with surgical precision. I spent nights in the garage, the dim light of a single bulb casting shadows over Daniel Hargrove's life laid bare on my workbench. His weaknesses were clear. Greed, arrogance, a trail of burned bridges. I started with his enemies. One name stood out in the lawsuit documents. A woman named Clara Evans, a former tenant he'd forced out of her apartment building with falsified eviction notices. She'd fought him in court and lost, her small business ruined in the fallout. Her anger was still raw. I found her on a local forum, railing against crooked developers. I reached out anonymously through a burner email, posing as a journalist digging into Daniel's shady deals. "I'd love your story," I wrote. She replied within hours, eager to talk. We met at a rundown coffee shop on the edge of town. Her graying hair pulled back, her eyes sharp with resentment. Over bitter coffee, she spilled everything. How Daniel had bribed inspectors, how he'd laughed when she begged to keep her lease, how he'd bragged about owning this city. I recorded it all on my phone, hidden in my jacket. "He's untouchable," she said, her voice cracking. "Not anymore," I replied, and she paused, studying me. I didn't tell her my real motive, but I promised her justice if she helped me. She agreed, handing over old emails and a photo of Daniel with a city official, mid-handshake, a smug grin on his face. It was a start, a crack I could widen. Back home, Emily was oblivious, her routine unchanged. She'd kiss me goodbye, head to her gallery shifts, and I'd watch her go, knowing she was meeting him. The camera caught them again. Another afternoon on our couch, her laughter echoing through the footage. I didn't flinch this time. I studied it, noting every detail. The way he adjusted his tie, the brand of wine she poured. I was past pain now, into something harder, more focused. Clara's evidence was the first piece. I needed more. I drove to Daniel's building late one night, parked across the street, and watched. A woman, not Emily, left his penthouse, teetering in heels, her face flushed. Another rotation, just like Mike said. I snapped photos, added them to my growing file. This wasn't just about Emily anymore. It was about dismantling him, piece by piece. Clara became my unlikely ally, a woman fueled by the same betrayal I felt, though hers was different. She introduced me to others Daniel had crossed, a contractor he'd stiffed, a rival developer he'd undercut with dirty tricks. We met in secret, a small circle of the wronged, plotting in a basement bar that smelled of stale beer and regret. I didn't tell them about Emily. I said I was a whistleblower, a man tired of corruption. They bought it, their own grudges blinding them to my lies. Together, we pooled resources, forged documents, insider tips, a USB drive from the contractor with recordings of Daniel boasting about his schemes. It was enough to rattle his empire, but I wanted more than a scandal. I wanted him broken. Emily's weekend away with Daniel was coming up, their river cabin escape. I saw it as my chance. I called Mike again, asked him to tail them, get proof of their time there. Something personal, I said. Something undeniable. He grunted, took the job. Meanwhile, I worked on Emily's end. She'd always been vain about her image, her perfect life, her perfect marriage. I started planting seeds. I accidentally left a bank statement on the counter, circled a withdrawal she couldn't explain. Money she'd spent on him, I was sure. She brushed it off, but I saw the flicker of unease in her eyes. I mentioned a coworker seeing her at that cafe, watched her stumble over a lie about a client meeting. She was getting sloppy and I was tightening the noose. Mike delivered the next day. Photos of them at the cabin, her in a silk robe, him shirtless on the porch, their hands entwined. There was a video too, grainy but clear. Her voice, soft and teasing, calling him my escape. I watched it alone, the garage cold around me, and felt nothing but clarity. This was my weapon, not just against her, but against them both. I thanked Mike, paid him double, and turned back to my allies. Clara had a contact at a local paper, a reporter hungry for a scoop. I fed her the business dirt first, Daniel's bribes, his evictions, keeping the personal stuff for later. The story hit online that night, a quiet tremor before the quake I'd unleash. The article spread like wildfire, Daniel's name trending locally by morning. I watched Emily over breakfast, her phone buzzing non-stop, her brow furrowed as she scrolled. Some developers in trouble, she muttered, not meeting my eyes. Sounds messy. I nodded, poured more coffee, and said nothing. She didn't know I'd lit the match. At work, I checked the fallout, clients pulling out of Daniel's projects, his social media flooded with accusations. Clara texted me, "He's scrambling. Keep pushing." I did. I sent the reporter more anonymous tips about his other women, vague enough to stir curiosity but not point to Emily yet. Let him sweat, I thought. Let him feel the walls closing in. Emily came home late, distracted, her usual chatter replaced by silence. I asked about her day. She shrugged, said the gallery was busy. I knew she'd been with him. Mike confirmed it, a quick meetup at a hotel downtown. She was rattled, probably sensing his panic. Good. I needed her off balance. That night, I hacked her phone again, found new texts. "This is bad, need to lay low." His confidence was cracking, and she was clinging to him, begging for reassurance. "We'll get through it," she wrote. I smirked, saved the thread, and planned my next move. The cabin was key, it tied them together, a physical anchor for their lie. I'd turn it into their undoing. I drove out there again, this time with a purpose. The cabin was empty, the air crisp with early spring. I broke in through a loose window, careful not to leave prints. Inside, I planted evidence. Some of Daniel's cufflinks from our house, a scarf of Emily's I'd taken from her closet, a fake lease tying the property to one of his shell companies. Then I called Clara's reporter friend, left an anonymous tip about Hargrove's secret hideaway. By morning, the press was there, snapping photos, speculating about affairs and dirty money. Emily's scarf made it into one shot, a blurry splash of red on the porch. She'd see it soon enough. I wanted her to squirm, to wonder how it got there, to feel the noose tightening too. The cabin story hit the local news that night, a juicy sidebar to Daniel's crumbling empire. I watched Emily's face as she flipped on the TV, her fork frozen midair over dinner. The reporter mentioned personal items found at the scene, and her eyes widened, just for a second, before she forced a laugh. "Crazy stuff," she said, too casual. I agreed, my tone neutral, and cleared the plates. She didn't suspect me. Not yet. But the doubt was there, gnawing at her. I saw it in how she checked her phone, how she paced the living room after I went to bed. She called him, her voice hushed through the wall. "How did they find it? What do we do?" His reply was muffled, but I didn't need to hear it. They were trapped, and I was the hunter. Daniel's world was imploding faster now. The contractor's recordings leaked online. His voice, smug and clear, bragging about rigging bids. Investors bailed, lawsuits piled up, and his penthouse was swarmed by reporters. I fed the fire, slipping Clara more dirt. A bank account tied to his bribes, names of officials he'd paid off. She didn't ask where I got it. She just kept pushing. But I held back the personal stuff, the photos, the video, Emily's texts. That was my ace, my final blow. I wanted them to think it was just business, just his past catching up, until I dropped the truth and watched them drown in it. Emily started unraveling. She came home the next day, pale, her hands trembling as she poured wine. "Rough day?" I asked, leaning on the counter. She nodded, muttered about stress at work, but I saw the cracks. Her mascara smudged, her nails bitten down. She was scared, and I savored it. That night, she slept fitfully, mumbling in her dreams. I lay beside her, awake, imagining her face when she realized I'd orchestrated it all. The revenge was taking shape, a cruel, beautiful thing. I'd destroy Daniel's life, then hers, and they'd never know how deeply I'd played them until it was too late. The next morning, I escalated. I mailed a package to Daniel's office, anonymously, through a drop box across town. Inside were printouts of his texts with Emily, the cabin photos, and a note. "You're not as clever as you think." No signature, no trace. I wanted him paranoid, looking over his shoulder, wondering who knew. At the same time, I sent Clara's reporter a USB with the hotel photos, him with the other woman, not Emily, timestamped days ago. The story shifted. Hargrove's double life exposed. His Playboy image clashed with his business ruin. A perfect storm of humiliation. I watched the news at work, my coworkers clucking about that sleazy guy. While I nodded along, my pulse steady. Emily was a wreck by evening. She didn't leave the house, called in sick, a first for her. I found her on the couch, wine glass empty, staring at her phone. The scarf photo had gone viral, and her friends were texting, asking questions she couldn't answer. "You okay?" I asked, sitting beside her. She flinched, then forced a smile. "Just tired," she said, but her voice shook. I patted her hand, playing the concerned husband, while inside I gloated. She was cornered, and Daniel wasn't saving her. Mike told me he'd gone dark, dodging calls, holed up in his penthouse. I'd cut their lifeline, left them flailing separately. That night, I finalized the cabin trap. I called a guy I knew from the hardware store, a rough type named Pete who owed me a favor. "Need a job done," I said, meeting him in a parking lot. No questions. I handed him cash and a list. Trash the cabin. Make it look like a break-in. Leave specific items. Daniel's cufflinks, Emily's scarf, scattered in the mess. Pete nodded, didn't blink. By morning, the news would scream vandalism, tying it to Daniel's scandals, and Emily's red scarf would be front and center again. I drove home, the weight of it settling in. Not guilt, not anymore, but a dark satisfaction. They'd betrayed me in ways I'd never imagined. Now I'd repay them tenfold, and the worst was still to come. Pete delivered. I woke to the news blaring about the cabin. Windows smashed, furniture overturned, Hargrove's love nest, trashed by unknown vandals. Emily's scarf was the star, draped over a broken chair in every photo. her initials embroidered in the corner for all to see. I watched her from the kitchen as she scrolled her phone, her face draining of color. "What's wrong?" I asked, sipping coffee, my voice calm. She stammered, "Nothing, just some weird story," and fled to the bathroom, the door slamming behind her. I heard the shower run, but I knew she was calling him, desperate for answers he couldn't give. Daniel's silence was my victory. Mike reported he'd left town, fleeing the press, leaving her to face the fallout alone. I turned up the heat. I leaked the cabin video to Clara's reporter. Emily's voice, her silhouette in that robe, unmistakable to anyone who knew her. The story exploded. Mystery woman tied to Hargrove's downfall. Her friends called. Her boss texted. And I watched her fumble excuses. Her perfect life unraveling thread by thread. At dinner, she barely ate, her eyes darting to me like she was waiting for me to ask. I didn't. I smiled, talked about my day, let her stew in the silence. That night, she packed a bag, mumbling about visiting her sister. I nodded, kissed her cheek, and watched her drive off, knowing she was running to him, or what was left of him. I had one more card to play, and it had hit them both where it hurt most. I called Clara. "It's time," I said. She'd been waiting, her own revenge aligned with mine. We met at the bar, her hand steady as she handed me a burner phone. "Use it wisely," she said. I did. I texted Daniel from it, pretending to be Emily. "Meet me at the cabin. We need to fix this." Then I texted Emily as him. "Cabin, tonight, last chance." I knew they'd go, her desperation, his ego, would pull them there. I drove out ahead, parked a mile away, and hiked through the woods, the night cold and still. The cabin was a wreck, just as Pete left it, and I waited in the shadows, my breath fogging the air, my plan locked in place. They arrived separately, Emily first, her car skidding into the muddy drive. She stepped out, her coat pulled tight, her face a mix of fear and hope. She called his name, her voice echoing off the trees, but he wasn't there yet. I stayed hidden, watching her pace the porch, her phone glowing as she texted him. Then his headlights cut through the dark, his sleek car now dented and dirty, a far cry from the polished man I'd first seen. He climbed out, his suit rumpled, his eyes wild. "What the hell, Emily?" he snapped, stomping toward her. "You said we were done." She froze, confusion twisting her face. "You told me to come." They argued, voices rising, each blaming the other, oblivious to the trap. I stepped closer, still unseen, and triggered the next phase. I'd rigged a small speaker in the cabin, hooked to my phone. It crackled to life, playing the audio from their hotel meetup, her laughter, his low murmurs, intimate and damning. They stopped, staring at the broken window where the sound poured out. "What is this?" Daniel growled, kicking the door open. Emily followed, trembling, as the recording looped, her own voice mocking her. I'd left more inside. Photos from the couch, her texts printed and scattered like confetti. She gasped, picking one up, while he cursed, realizing someone knew everything. "We're screwed," he muttered, turning on her. "This is your fault." That's when I called the cops. Anonymous, from the burner. "Suspicious activity at the Hargrove cabin," I said, giving the address. "Looks like a fight." I hung up, retreated to my vantage point, and waited. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder, and their panic spiked. Emily tried to run, but Daniel grabbed her arm, shouting about fixing it. The lights flashed through the trees, and 2 officers stepped out, barking orders. They froze, caught in the wreckage, her scarf still tangled in the mess. I watched, my heart steady, as they were cuffed. Trespassing, vandalism, whatever the cops could pin on them. It wasn't the crime that mattered. It was the shame, the spotlight, the end of their illusions. The arrest made headlines by morning. Hargrove and mystery woman detained at trashed hideaway. Emily's name leaked. Someone at the gallery recognized her. And the photos showed her in handcuffs, mascara streaking her face, Daniel beside her, his arrogance gone. I sat at home, the TV on mute, scrolling the updates. Her sister called me. Frantic. What's happening? She said she was with you. I played dumb, my voice cracking just enough. I don't know, Jen. She left last night. I'm as shocked as you. She bought it, and I hung up, the lie settling like dust. Emily didn't call. She couldn't, not from a holding cell, but I knew she'd try soon, begging for help. I wouldn't give it. Daniel's empire was ash now. The vandalism pinned on him, thanks to Pete's careful staging, tanked his last deals, his creditors circling like vultures. The other women came forward, spurred by the news, their stories burying him deeper. Clara texted me a thumbs up. He's finished. She didn't know the half of it. I'd mailed her a bonus, cash untraceable, thanking her for her part. She'd gotten her revenge. Mine was still unfolding. Emily's gallery fired her that afternoon, her reputation shredded by the scandal. Her friends ghosted her, her perfect image shattered. I pictured her in that cell, alone, realizing she'd lost everything. Not just him, but me, her life, her lies. I went to work, kept my routine, let the world buzz around me. Coworkers gossiped about that Hargrove mess, some mentioning Emily's name with raised brows. I shrugged, said we were separated, let them fill in the blanks. That night I cleaned the house, her clothes, her art books, her perfume, boxed up and stacked in the garage. I wiped the camera footage, burned the lockbox contents in a barrel out back, the smoke curling into the sky. No evidence, no trail, just a man wronged and moving on. But I wasn't done. The cruelest cut was coming, and it'd be personal, a wound she'd carry forever. Emily was released the next day, no charges, just a warning and a ruined name. She came home, her key trembling in the lock, her face gaunt and tear-streaked. I was on the couch, a beer in hand, the TV off. She stood there, silent, then whispered, "I'm sorry." I looked at her, the woman I'd loved, now a stranger. "For what?" I asked, my tone flat. She faltered, clutching her bag, and started a story. Daniel was a mistake. She'd been lost. She'd fix it. I let her talk, her voice breaking, until she ran out of words. Then I stood, handed her the divorce papers I'd printed that morning, already signed. "You're out by tomorrow," I said, walking past her to the bedroom, locking the door behind me. She cried all night, banging on the door, pleading through the wood. I didn't answer. Morning came, and she was gone, her car packed with the boxes I'd left out. I called a locksmith, changed the locks, and scrubbed her from the house. But that wasn't the end. I'd kept one last piece, the video from the cabin, her "My Escape" line looped into a clip. I edited it, added the couch footage, her text scrolling across the screen like credits to her betrayal. I uploaded it to a burner account, sent it to her parents, her sister, her old college friends, everyone she'd ever cared about impressing. The email read, "This is who she really is. No name, no trace, just truth." Her sister called me, furious, then sobbing, begging me to take it down. "She's destroyed," Jen said. "She's talking about leaving the state." I said I didn't know what she meant, that I'd been hacked too, and hung up. Daniel's fate was sealed. Bankrupt, disgraced, a pariah. But Emily's was worse. She'd built her life on appearances, and I'd stripped them away, left her naked to the world she'd curated. I pictured her now, alone somewhere, seeing that video everywhere, knowing it was me but never proving it. That was my revenge. Not loud, not violent, but a slow, cruel erasure of everything she'd been. Weeks passed, and the dust settled. Daniel vanished. Rumors said he'd fled overseas, chased by debts and warrants. Emily surfaced briefly, a blurry photo on her sister's social media. Her hair dyed dark, her eyes hollow. She'd moved, Jen told a mutual friend, somewhere cheap and far, cut off from everyone. The video lingered online, reposted by strangers, a ghost she couldn't outrun. I sold the house, pocketed the equity, and bought a small place upstate. A cabin of my own, ironic but fitting. No river, just woods, quiet and mine. I started over, the hardware store job traded for freelance carpentry. My hands busy, my mind clear. People asked about her sometimes, old neighbors or coworkers fishing for gossip. I'd shrug, say we drifted apart, let them assume what they wanted. The truth was mine alone, a weight I carried without regret. Clara sent me a card once. No return address. Thanks for the fight. I burned it like I'd burned the rest and moved on. The revenge wasn't just their ruin. It was my freedom, reclaimed from the ashes of their lies. I turned their betrayal into something unusual, a quiet storm that left them broken and me whole. One night, I sat on my porch, the stars sharp overhead, and thought about her. Not with love, not with hate, but with a cold satisfaction. She'd wanted an escape, a thrill, a man who wasn't me. She got it, and it cost her everything. Daniel was her mirror, a narcissist who'd used her until she was useless. I'd used them both, flipped their game, and won. The cruelty wasn't in the act. It was in the precision, the way I'd made them destroy themselves. I finished my beer, went inside, and slept better than I had in years, the past finally silent behind me.